Millionaire humiliates Maid with marriage proposal. Then she drops 3 words that leave him speechless. Eleanor, with her gentle demeanor and hands etched with the map of a life dedicated to service, was the epitome of an unassuming maid. For the past decade, the grand Thornton mansion, perched like a haughty eagle on the cliffs overlooking the Hudson River, had been her domain. Her days unfolded in a predictable, almost meditative rhythm. The soft whisper of a feather duster caressing priceless porcelain, the rhythmic gleam of silver polished to a blinding shine, the crisp scent of freshly laundered linen that spoke of wealth and privilege. She moved through the opulent rooms like a whisper of wind, her presence acknowledged only in the pristine order she left in her wake. Despite the stark contrast between her own humble origins and the ostentatious wealth that surrounded her, Eleanor harbored no resentment towards the Thorntons. She understood the invisible line that separated their worlds, content in the quiet dignity of her work and the modest comforts it afforded her. She found solace in the simple routines of her life, in the quiet moments stolen between tasks to admire a shaft of sunlight illuminating a dust mote or the delicate dance of a hummingbird outside the window. Arthur Thornton, the master of the house, was a man who embodied the American dream taken to its ruthless extreme. A self-made millionaire, he had clawed his way to the top of the corporate ladder, leaving a trail of broken competitors and shrewd deals in his wake. He was a man who measured the world in profit margins and calculated risks, believing that everything, even human relationships, could be reduced to a transaction. His wife, Catherine, was a creature of society, her life a carefully orchestrated performance of charity galas, high-tea gatherings, and designer labels. She navigated their social circle with the practiced ease of a seasoned diplomat, her smile as polished and insincere as the silverware Eleanor meticulously cleaned. Their 2 children, Alexander and Victoria, were mirror images of their parents, albeit younger and less refined versions. Alexander, with his father's sharp eyes and his mother's haughty demeanor, was already displaying a talent for manipulation and a disdain for those he deemed beneath him. Victoria, a whirlwind of designer dresses and petulant demands, possessed her mother's social ambition and a talent for turning a blind eye to the realities of the world outside their gilded cage. To the Thorntons, Eleanor was merely a function of their household, an invisible hand that maintained the smooth operation of their luxurious lifestyle. Their interactions with her were limited to curt commands and dismissive gestures, their voices carrying the weight of their perceived superiority. Yet, Eleanor never faltered in her duties, her work ethic unwavering, her demeanor respectful. She possessed a quiet dignity that their disdain couldn't touch, a strength that stemmed from a deep well of self-respect. Arthur, however, saw something different in Eleanor. Her humility, her unwavering dedication, and her refusal to be cowed by his wealth intrigued him. It was a stark contrast to the sycophantic behavior he was accustomed to from those eager to bask in the reflected glory of his success. He saw in her a challenge, a puzzle to be solved, a fortress to be breached. He began to test her, pushing her boundaries, observing her reactions with a predatory curiosity. He would leave large sums of money lying around, feigning forgetfulness, only to find it returned to him without a word, placed discreetly on his desk beside a single white rose from the garden. He would make unreasonable demands, expecting her to crumble under the pressure, but she would simply comply, her face an impassive mask that hid the turmoil within. His fascination grew, twisting into a perverse desire to break her, to strip her of her dignity and expose the vulnerability he sensed beneath her calm exterior. He wanted to see her crack, to hear her beg, to prove to himself that everyone had a price, even the seemingly incorruptible Eleanor. And so, an insidious plan began to form in his mind, a plan that would shatter Eleanor's world and expose the true depths of his own cruelty. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves and the promise of winter as Arthur summoned Eleanor to his opulent study. The room, with its dark wood paneling and shelves overflowing with leather-bound volumes, was a sanctuary of power and masculine authority. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the Persian rug and illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Arthur sat behind his massive mahogany desk, a fortress of polished wood and gleaming brass, his expression unreadable, his eyes like chips of flint. Eleanor stood before him, her hands clasped in front of her, her gaze lowered respectfully, her worn cotton dress a stark contrast to the surrounding luxury. "Eleanor," Arthur began, his voice smooth and calculated, each word a carefully placed chess piece in the game he was playing. "I have a proposition for you." Eleanor looked up, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. In all her years of service, Arthur had rarely addressed her directly, let alone with such formality. His voice, usually a booming command or a dismissive grunt, now held a note of something else, something that sent a shiver down her spine. "I intend to marry you," he continued, his lips curving into a cruel smile that didn't reach his eyes. Eleanor's breath hitched in her throat, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Marry her? The millionaire, the master of the house, the man who barely acknowledged her existence, wanted to marry her. The maid? It was preposterous, a cruel joke, a twisted game played by a man who wielded power like a weapon. "I know this must come as a shock," Arthur said, misinterpreting her stunned silence as hesitant acceptance. "But I assure you, I am quite serious. I find myself drawn to you, Eleanor. Your quiet strength, your unwavering loyalty, these are qualities I admire." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a predatory light that made her skin crawl. "Of course, this union would come with certain benefits. You would be elevated to a position of wealth and privilege beyond your wildest dreams. No longer a servant, but my wife. You would have access to everything I own, everything I am." Eleanor's mind reeled. She understood the true nature of his proposal. It wasn't love that motivated him, but a twisted desire to humiliate her, to flaunt his power by elevating her to a position she could never truly occupy. He wanted to make her a spectacle, a trophy wife to be paraded before his social circle, a constant reminder of his dominance and her subservience. He wanted to break her, to mold her into a reflection of his own twisted desires. I need time to consider your proposal, Mr. Thornton," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper, her usual calm demeanor cracking under the weight of his proposition. "Of course," Arthur said, his smile widening, the predator savoring the fear in his prey's eyes. "Take all the time you need, but I trust you will make the right decision." Eleanor fled the study, her mind in turmoil, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. She couldn't comprehend the depths of Arthur's cruelty. How could he subject her to such a degrading proposition? The thought of marrying him, of becoming his wife in name only, filled her with revulsion. But she also knew that refusing him could have dire consequences. He was a powerful man, used to getting his way, his anger as legendary as his business acumen. What would he do if she defied him? Would he fire her? Blacklist her from ever finding another job? Worse, days turned into weeks, and Eleanor found herself trapped in a web of fear and uncertainty. Arthur, true to his word, gave her time to consider his proposal, but his constant presence was a suffocating reminder of the impending decision. He would appear unexpectedly in the hallways, his eyes following her every move, his words laced with veiled threats and promises. He would send her extravagant gifts, diamonds and pearls that felt like shackles on her soul. Eleanor felt her spirit slowly crumbling under the weight of his relentless pursuit, the quiet sanctuary of her life shattered by his intrusion. She confided in no one, her pride and her fear preventing her from seeking help. She spent her nights tossing and turning, her dreams haunted by Arthur's predatory gaze and the suffocating weight of his wealth. She would wake in a cold sweat, the silence of the mansion pressing down on her like a physical weight. She felt isolated, trapped, her life no longer her own. One evening, while cleaning the library, a room she usually avoided due to its oppressive atmosphere of intellectual superiority, Eleanor stumbled upon a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf. It was concealed by a cleverly disguised panel, its existence betrayed only by a faint discrepancy in the wood grain. Curiosity piqued, she pressed the hidden latch, and the panel swung open, revealing a small, dust-filled cavity. Inside, She found a stack of old letters tied with a faded silk ribbon, the color of forgotten lavender. She recognized the elegant, flowing handwriting on the envelopes. They were letters written by Arthur's late mother, a woman she had only heard whispers of, a woman of legendary beauty and social grace. With a mixture of guilt and fascination, Eleanor carefully untied the ribbon and began to read the letters. They painted a vivid picture of a young Arthur, a sensitive and lonely boy who craved his mother's love and approval. His father, a cold and distant man obsessed with business and social climbing, had shown little affection towards his son, leaving Arthur yearning for warmth and connection. His mother, though loving in her own way, was often preoccupied with her own social obligations, her life a whirlwind of parties and charitable events. She showered Arthur with material possessions, but her emotional absence left him feeling neglected and misunderstood. As Eleanor delved deeper into the letters, a pattern began to emerge. Arthur's mother, in her well-meaning but misguided attempts to motivate her son, would often use shame and humiliation as tools. She would compare him to other boys, belittling his achievements and highlighting his shortcomings. She would publicly reprimand him for any perceived weakness, her sharp words cutting him to the core. She believed she was toughening him up, preparing him for the harsh realities of the world, but her actions only served to deepen his insecurities and fuel his resentment. Eleanor realized with a jolt that Arthur's cruel proposal was not simply a whim, but a deeply ingrained pattern of behavior rooted in his childhood experiences. He was reenacting the same dynamics he had endured as a child, using humiliation and control to assert his power and mask his own deep-seated insecurities. He was trying to break her, not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to validate his own worth, to prove to himself that he was not the weak and inadequate boy his mother had made him feel. This revelation filled Eleanor with a mix of sadness and understanding. She saw Arthur in a new light, not just as a cruel millionaire, but as a wounded and deeply insecure man trapped in a cycle of emotional abuse. She felt a surge of empathy for him, a desire to help him break free from the chains of his past, to show him that there was another way to live, a way based on kindness, compassion, and genuine connection. But what could she do? How could she, a simple maid, possibly help a man like Arthur Thornton, a man who seemed determined to destroy himself and those around him? The answer, she realized, lay in the very situation he had created. She would use his own game against him, turning his cruel proposal into an opportunity for healing and redemption. She would accept his offer, but not as a submissive victim. She would enter his world, not as a possession to be flaunted, but as a mirror reflecting his own flaws and insecurities. She would challenge him, provoke him, and ultimately force him to confront the demons that haunted him. Eleanor decided to accept Arthur's proposal. However, she would not be a passive victim in his twisted game. She would use her newfound understanding of his past to challenge his behavior and force him to confront his own demons. She would use his own weapon, his wealth and social standing, to expose the hollowness of his existence and the emptiness of his pursuits. When she informed Arthur of her decision, his elation was palpable. He saw it as a victory, a testament to his power and control. He immediately set about planning a lavish wedding, sparing no expense to impress his social circle and humiliate Eleanor further. He chose a magnificent cathedral, its stained glass windows casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the marble floor, its vaulted ceilings echoing with the whispers of centuries. He hired the most renowned caterers, their menus boasting delicacies from around the world, their tables laden with crystal and silver. He ordered a designer gown for Eleanor that was more suited for a queen than a maid, its silk and lace whispering of wealth and privilege. Eleanor played along, outwardly compliant, inwardly resolute. She attended the endless fittings, enduring the condescending remarks from Catherine, who saw her as a threat to her social dominance, and the snide comments from Alexander and Victoria, who couldn't comprehend why their father would choose a maid over a suitable socialite. All the while, she observed Arthur closely, studying his every move, his every expression, like a scientist dissecting a specimen. She saw the cracks in his facade, the flicker of insecurity in his eyes, the fleeting moments of vulnerability that he desperately tried to conceal. As the wedding day approached, the tension in the mansion reached a fever pitch. Arthur was consumed with excitement, eager to see his plan come to fruition, to witness Eleanor's humiliation and bask in the admiration of his peers. Eleanor, however, remained calm, her resolve strengthened by her newfound purpose. She knew she was walking into a lion's den, but she was armed with the knowledge of the lion's weaknesses, the scars that lay hidden beneath its roar. On the day of the wedding, the cathedral was filled with the crème de la crème of society, all eager to witness the spectacle of the millionaire marrying his maid. They whispered behind their gloved hands, their eyes filled with curiosity and judgment. Arthur, resplendent in his tailored suit, stood at the altar, a smug smile plastered on his face, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Eleanor, in her opulent gown, a bird trapped in a gilded cage, walked down the aisle, her head held high, her eyes fixed on Arthur, her gaze steady and unwavering. As the priest began the ceremony, a hush fell over the congregation. Arthur, basking in the attention, barely noticed the subtle change in Eleanor's demeanor. But when it came time for her to say, "I do," she paused, her gaze piercing Arthur's, her eyes like twin flames burning through his carefully constructed facade. "I cannot marry you, Arthur," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the silence like a knife. A collective gasp arose from the audience, a ripple of shock that spread through the cathedral like a tidal wave. Arthur's smile faltered, replaced by a look of confusion and anger. His carefully orchestrated plan was crumbling before his eyes, his control slipping away. "What is the meaning of this, Eleanor?" he hissed, his voice laced with menace, his pride wounded, his power challenged. "I have learned much about you in the past few weeks, Arthur," she continued, ignoring his outburst, her voice unwavering, her gaze unwavering. "I have read your mother's letters, and I understand the pain and insecurity that drive your actions." She stepped closer to him, her eyes filled with compassion, not for the man he pretended to be, but for the wounded boy hidden within. "You are not a cruel man, Arthur. You are a wounded boy trapped in a cycle of abuse. You seek to control and humiliate others because you were once controlled and humiliated yourself." Arthur's face paled, his anger replaced by a look of shame and vulnerability. The mask he had worn for so long was slipping, revealing the raw emotions he had suppressed for a lifetime. He opened his mouth to speak, to deny, to deflect, but no words came out. "I cannot be a part of this cycle, Arthur," Eleanor said, her voice softening, her words carrying the weight of truth and compassion. "I cannot marry you, not because I despise you, but because I pity you. You need healing, Arthur, not another victim." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Arthur standing at the altar, exposed and defeated. The congregation watched in stunned silence as Eleanor exited the cathedral, her head held high, her dignity intact, the train of her opulent gown trailing behind her like a banner of defiance. She left behind a trail of whispers and gasps, a ripple of shock that would reverberate through their social circles for years to come. But more importantly, she left behind a man stripped bare, forced to confront the consequences of his actions and the emptiness of his life. While the drama with Arthur unfolded, a secondary plot involving Eleanor and the Thornton children, Alexander and Victoria, was also developing. Initially, they treated Eleanor with the same disdain as their parents, seeing her as nothing more than a servant, an invisible fixture in their privileged lives. However, as they witnessed their father's increasingly erratic behavior towards Eleanor, their curiosity was piqued. They observed the subtle changes in their father's demeanor, the obsessive gleam in his eyes, the veiled threats and extravagant gifts that seemed more like attempts at control than genuine affection. Alexander, the elder of the two, was particularly intrigued by Eleanor's quiet defiance. He had always been intimidated by his father's domineering personality, his own ambitions overshadowed by his father's towering presence. He admired Eleanor's courage in standing up to him, her refusal to be cowed by his wealth and power. He began to observe her more closely, noticing her kindness, her intelligence, and her unwavering sense of self-worth. He saw in her a strength that he lacked, a moral compass that he yearned for. Victoria, initially more resistant to seeing Eleanor as anything other than a servant, gradually warmed up to her as well. She was drawn to Eleanor's gentle nature and her genuine concern for others, a stark contrast to the superficial relationships that dominated her own life. She began to confide in Eleanor, sharing her insecurities and frustrations about her privileged yet suffocating life. She spoke of her yearning for authenticity, for a life beyond the confines of their social circle, for a love that wasn't based on appearances and social status. As the wedding day approached, Alexander and Victoria found themselves increasingly uncomfortable with their father's plan to humiliate Eleanor. They realized that she was not the simple, subservient maid they had initially perceived her to be. She was a woman of strength and dignity, deserving of their respect, not their scorn. They saw the fear in her eyes, the quiet resolve in her demeanor, and they felt a pang of guilt for their own complicity in their father's cruel game. On the wedding day, as they witnessed Eleanor's courageous confrontation with their father, their admiration for her grew even stronger. They realized that she had not only stood up for herself but had also exposed the deep-seated flaws in their family dynamic. Her actions had shaken the foundations of their world, forcing them to question the values they had been raised with, the shallowness of their social circle, and the emptiness of their own pursuits. After the wedding debacle, Alexander and Victoria approached Eleanor, their faces flushed with shame and admiration. They expressed their support and gratitude, their voices trembling with emotion. They apologized for their past behavior, for their blindness and their arrogance. They vowed to treat her with the respect she deserved, to see her not as a servant, but as a person, a friend, a mentor. This marked a turning point in their relationship, paving the way for a genuine connection based on mutual respect and understanding. Eleanor, touched by their sincerity, welcomed their friendship, offering them guidance and support as they navigated the complexities of their own lives. She became a confidant, a mentor, a source of wisdom and strength in a world that often felt superficial and confusing. In the aftermath of the aborted wedding, Arthur was left to grapple with the consequences of his actions. Eleanor's words had struck a chord within him, shattering his carefully constructed facade and forcing him to confront the deep-seated insecurities and emotional wounds he had been carrying for so long. He was ashamed of his behavior, not just towards Eleanor, but towards everyone in his life. He saw the disgust in the eyes of his peers, the disappointment in the eyes of his children, and the emptiness in the eyes of his wife. He began to withdraw from society, shunning his business associates and avoiding his family. He spent his days alone in his study, the once sanctuary of power now a prison of his own making. He reflected on his life and the choices he had made, the ruthless pursuit of wealth and power that had left him isolated and unfulfilled. He reread his mother's letters, this time with a newfound understanding, recognizing the patterns of emotional abuse that had shaped his own behavior. He saw how he had replicated those patterns in his own relationships, using control and manipulation to mask his own vulnerabilities. One day, driven by a desperate need for connection and forgiveness, he decided to seek out Eleanor. He found her in the garden, her hands gently tending to the roses, her face bathed in the soft afternoon light. He approached her hesitantly, unsure of how she would react, his pride battling with his shame. "Eleanor," he began, his voice faltering, the usual arrogance replaced by a vulnerability he had never allowed himself to show. I owe you an apology." Eleanor turned to face him, her expression calm and composed, her eyes reflecting the wisdom and compassion he had so desperately sought. "I appreciate that, Arthur," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I was wrong to treat you the way I did," he continued, his voice filled with remorse, the words catching in his throat. "I used you, humiliated you, all to satisfy my own twisted needs. I am truly sorry." Eleanor nodded, accepting his apology without judgment. "I understand why you did what you did, Arthur," she said, her voice carrying a hint of sadness. "But that doesn't excuse your behavior." "I know," he said, his head bowed in shame, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. "I want to change, Eleanor. I want to be a better man." Eleanor looked at him, her eyes filled with compassion and a glimmer of hope. "I believe you can, Arthur," she said. "But it will take time and effort." Arthur nodded, determined to prove her right. He began to attend therapy, seeking professional help to address his emotional issues. He delved into his past, confronting the pain and insecurity that had driven his behavior for so long. He learned to recognize his destructive patterns, to manage his anger, and to express his emotions in healthy ways. He also started spending more time with his children, trying to build genuine relationships with them based on love and respect. He listened to their dreams and aspirations, offering guidance and support without judgment. He attended their school events, took them on outings, and made an effort to be present in their lives, not just physically but emotionally. As Arthur worked on himself, his relationship with Eleanor gradually transformed. They began to have conversations, not as master and servant, but as two individuals with shared experiences and mutual understanding. Arthur learned to value Eleanor's wisdom and insights, her perspective offering him a glimpse into a world he had never truly seen. Eleanor, in turn, saw the potential for good within him, the flicker of compassion and empathy that had been buried beneath layers of arrogance and insecurity. Their relationship remained platonic, a deep and meaningful connection forged in the fires of adversity and redemption. They became each other's confidants, supporting each other on their respective journeys of healing and growth. They shared their hopes and fears, their triumphs and setbacks, their laughter and tears. Their bond, born out of a cruel game, blossomed into a true friendship, a testament to the human capacity for forgiveness and transformation. Months passed, and Arthur made significant progress in his therapy. He learned to recognize his destructive patterns, to manage his anger, and to express his emotions in healthy ways. He became more involved in his children's lives, attending their school events and taking a genuine interest in their hobbies. He even started volunteering at a local homeless shelter, using his wealth and influence to help those less fortunate. He found satisfaction in giving back to the community, in using his resources to make a positive impact on the lives of others. However, his transformation was not without its challenges. His old habits would occasionally resurface, particularly when he felt threatened or insecure. He would lash out at his business associates, his voice rising in anger, his words laced with the old arrogance. Or he would withdraw into himself, isolating himself from those who cared about him, the old insecurities whispering doubts in his ear. One evening, during a particularly stressful business negotiation, Arthur lost his temper. The deal was important, the stakes were high, and the pressure was mounting. His colleagues, sensing his vulnerability, pushed their advantage, their words laced with veiled insults and thinly veiled threats. Arthur, feeling cornered and betrayed, erupted. He berated his colleagues, using the same demeaning language and tactics he had once used on Eleanor. His voice boomed through the conference room, his face contorted in anger, his eyes blazing with fury. As he stormed out of the meeting, the adrenaline fading, a wave of shame washed over him. He had reverted to his old ways, betraying the progress he had made, the lessons he had learned. He felt like a fraud, a hypocrite, a wolf in sheep's clothing. He had let his anger control him, his insecurities get the better of him. He went home and locked himself in his study, the once sanctuary of power now a prison of his own self-loathing. He paced the room, his mind racing, his heart pounding. He knew he needed to talk to someone, to confess his relapse and seek support. He thought of his therapist, but he couldn't bear the thought of disappointing him, of admitting his failure. He thought of his children, but he didn't want to burden them with his problems, to shatter their image of the new him. Finally, he thought of Eleanor. He knew she would understand, that she would offer him the compassion and support he desperately needed. He went to find her, his footsteps heavy, his heart filled with dread. He found her in the library, curled up in an armchair, a book in her lap, the soft light casting a warm glow on her face. "Eleanor," he said, his voice trembling, the vulnerability raw and exposed. "I need to talk to you." He confessed his relapse, pouring out his shame and frustration, his voice cracking with emotion. He described the meeting, the mounting pressure, the eruption of anger, the demeaning words that echoed in his ears. He spoke of his fear of backsliding, of losing the progress he had made, of becoming the man he once was. Eleanor listened patiently, her eyes filled with understanding and compassion. She saw the genuine remorse in his face, the pain in his eyes, the struggle within him. She knew that recovery was not a linear process, that there would be setbacks along the way. "It's okay, Arthur," she said when he had finished, her voice soft and reassuring. "Recovery is not a linear process. There will be setbacks along the way. What matters is that you recognize your mistakes and learn from them." "But I thought I had changed," he said, his voice filled with despair. "I thought I was finally free from my past." "You are changing, Arthur," she said, her voice firm and unwavering. "But it takes time. Don't give up on yourself. Don't let this one setback define you. You have come so far, Arthur. Don't lose sight of the progress you have made." Her words were like a balm to his wounded soul. He looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude and admiration. "Thank you, Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are a true friend." Despite his relapse, Arthur continued to work on himself. He redoubled his efforts in therapy, delving deeper into his past, confronting the root causes of his anger and insecurity. He practiced mindfulness techniques, learning to recognize his triggers and manage his emotions in healthy ways. He made a conscious effort to be more mindful of his thoughts and behaviors, to choose kindness over cruelty, empathy over arrogance. He also sought out Eleanor's support more often, confiding in her about his struggles and seeking her guidance. He valued her perspective, her wisdom, and her unwavering belief in his ability to change. He found solace in their conversations, in the safe space she provided for him to be vulnerable and honest. One day, Arthur received an invitation to a prestigious charity gala. He was hesitant to attend, knowing that it would be filled with the same people he had once tried to impress with his wealth and power. He was afraid of falling back into his old patterns, of reverting to his arrogant and controlling persona. He was afraid of being judged, of being seen as a fraud. He discussed his concerns with Eleanor, who encouraged him to attend the gala, but to do so with a different mindset. "Don't go there to impress anyone, Arthur," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Go there to be yourself, to connect with people on a genuine level. Go there to support the cause, to make a difference." Arthur took her advice to heart. At the gala, he made a conscious effort to be humble and approachable. He engaged in conversations with people from all walks of life, listening to their stories and sharing his own experiences. He spoke of his struggles, his mistakes, and his journey of transformation. He spoke of his newfound passion for philanthropy, his desire to use his wealth and influence for good. To his surprise, people responded positively to his changed demeanor. They were intrigued by his humility, his genuine interest in their lives, and his willingness to use his wealth for good. They saw the sincerity in his eyes, the authenticity in his words. Even Catherine, his wife, seemed to soften towards him, recognizing the positive changes he had made. She saw a glimmer of the man she had once fallen in love with, the man buried beneath layers of arrogance and insecurity. However, there were still those who doubted his sincerity. Some of his business associates saw his new persona as a facade, a calculated move to regain their trust and manipulate them for his own gain. They whispered behind his back, their words laced with skepticism and suspicion. They spread rumors about him, questioning his motives and undermining his efforts to rebuild his reputation. Arthur was aware of these rumors, and they stung him deeply. He was tempted to lash out, to defend himself against their accusations. But he remembered Eleanor's words, reminding him to stay true to himself and not let the opinions of others dictate his actions. He knew that true change came from within, not from seeking external validation. He decided to confront the rumors head-on. He called a meeting with his business associates, and he addressed their concerns openly and honestly. He acknowledged his past mistakes, his voice filled with remorse. But he also emphasized his commitment to change, his desire to make amends and build a better future. He presented them with concrete evidence of his philanthropic activities, the charities he supported, the causes he championed. He invited them to join him in his efforts to make a positive impact on the community, to use their collective wealth and influence for good. Some of his associates remained skeptical, their hearts hardened by years of cynicism and competition. But others were swayed by his sincerity, his vulnerability, and his genuine desire to make a difference. They began to see him in a new light, recognizing that he was genuinely trying to make amends for his past transgressions. Gradually, the rumors subsided, replaced by whispers of admiration and respect. Arthur's reputation began to recover, not as a ruthless businessman, but as a compassionate philanthropist. The charity gala marked a turning point in Arthur's life. He realized that true fulfillment came not from wealth and power, but from genuine human connection and making a positive impact on the world. He decided to shift his focus from business to philanthropy, dedicating his time and resources to supporting causes he believed in. He wanted to make a difference, to leave a legacy that extended beyond his own wealth and social standing. He established a foundation to support education and healthcare initiatives in underprivileged communities. He funded scholarships for promising students, built schools and hospitals in remote areas, and provided medical equipment and supplies to those in need. He also became actively involved in environmental conservation efforts, using his influence to promote sustainable practices and protect endangered species. He invested in renewable energy projects, funded research on climate change, and donated land to create nature reserves. He sold his mansion, the symbol of his former opulent lifestyle, the monument to his ego and his insatiable desire for more. He moved into a more modest home, a place that felt warm and inviting, a place where he could connect with his family and friends on a deeper level. He downsized his business, delegating many of his responsibilities to his trusted employees, allowing him to focus on his philanthropic endeavors. He found joy in empowering others, in sharing his knowledge and experience to help them succeed. He also made amends with his children, apologizing for his past neglect and making a conscious effort to be a present and loving father. He supported their dreams and aspirations, encouraging them to pursue their passions and make their own mark on the world. He spent time with them, listened to them, and shared his own experiences, both good and bad. He wanted them to learn from his mistakes, to avoid the pitfalls he had fallen into, to find true fulfillment in their lives. Arthur's transformation was not just personal, but also professional. He became known not as a ruthless businessman, but as a compassionate philanthropist. He was invited to speak at conferences and events, sharing his story of redemption and inspiring others to use their wealth and influence for good. He spoke of the importance of humility, empathy, and social responsibility. He encouraged others to look beyond their own self-interest and contribute to the betterment of society. He even reconnected with Eleanor, not as a former employer, but as a friend and confidant. They would often meet for tea, their conversations ranging from personal reflections to social and environmental issues. They shared their hopes and fears, their dreams and aspirations. They challenged each other, supported each other, and celebrated each other's successes. Their friendship, born out of adversity, blossomed into a deep and meaningful connection, based on mutual respect, understanding, and shared values. Arthur's journey of transformation was a testament to the power of self-reflection and the human capacity for change. He had started as a man consumed by greed and insecurity, using his wealth and power to control and humiliate others. But through Eleanor's unwavering dignity and his own willingness to confront his past, he had evolved into a compassionate and generous individual, dedicated to making a positive impact on the world. He had learned that true wealth lay not in material possessions, but in human connection and the satisfaction of making a difference in the lives of others. He had discovered the importance of humility, recognizing that his success was not solely due to his own efforts, but also to the contributions of others. He had learned to appreciate the value of empathy, putting himself in the shoes of others and understanding their perspectives. He had developed a genuine concern for the well-being of others, extending his compassion beyond his immediate circle to encompass the wider community and the world at large. He had also learned to appreciate the value of true friendship, the kind that transcends social barriers and offers unconditional support. His friendship with Eleanor had been instrumental in his transformation, providing him with the guidance, compassion, and encouragement he needed to navigate his journey of self-discovery. He had learned to value her wisdom, her insights, and her unwavering belief in his ability to change. Eleanor, too, had grown through her experiences with Arthur. She had faced adversity with grace and courage, refusing to be defined by her social status or succumb to the manipulations of a powerful man. She had used her understanding and empathy to help Arthur confront his demons, playing a pivotal role in his redemption. She had shown him that kindness and compassion could be more powerful than wealth and power, that true strength lay in vulnerability and authenticity. She had also learned to recognize her own worth, refusing to be treated as anything less than an equal. She had discovered the power of her own voice, using it to speak truth to power and challenge the status quo. She had learned to trust her instincts, to stand up for what she believed in, and to never compromise her values. Their shared journey had not only transformed their own lives, but had also impacted those around them. Arthur's children had learned the importance of humility and compassion, witnessing their father's transformation from a domineering figure to a loving and supportive parent. They had learned to value genuine connection over social status, and to find fulfillment in making a positive impact on the world. His business associates had witnessed the power of redemption and the possibility of change. They had seen Arthur confront his flaws, make amends for his past mistakes, and dedicate his life to helping others. They had learned that success could be measured not just in profits, but also in social responsibility and ethical conduct. Even Catherine, Arthur's wife, had undergone a subtle transformation. She had initially been complicit in Arthur's cruel game, more concerned with social appearances than genuine human connection. But as she witnessed Arthur's transformation, she began to question her own values and priorities. She started to engage in charitable activities, finding fulfillment in helping others. She made an effort to connect with her children on a deeper level, expressing her love and support for their dreams and aspirations. The ripple effects of Arthur and Eleanor's journey extended far beyond their immediate circle, touching the lives of countless individuals and inspiring them to embrace change, pursue their passions, and make a positive impact on the world. The story of Arthur and Eleanor is a testament to the transformative power of human connection and the capacity for change, even in the most unlikely of circumstances. It highlights the importance of empathy, self-reflection, and the courage to confront one's own flaws. It is a story of redemption, of second chances, and of the enduring power of the human spirit. Arthur's journey from a ruthless millionaire to a compassionate philanthropist underscores the idea that true fulfillment comes not from material wealth or social status, but from making a positive impact on the world and connecting with others on a genuine level. It shows that even those who seem lost in the pursuit of power and wealth can find redemption through self-reflection, empathy, and a willingness to change. Eleanor's unwavering dignity and quiet strength serve as a reminder that true worth is not determined by social standing or external circumstances, but by inner strength and character. Her courage in standing up to Arthur, her compassion in helping him confront his demons, and her unwavering belief in his ability to change, all exemplify the power of human connection and the transformative potential of empathy. Their story also emphasizes the importance of forgiveness and second chances. Arthur, despite his past transgressions, was able to find redemption through his own efforts and the support of those who believed in him. He learned to forgive himself for his mistakes, and he sought forgiveness from those he had wronged. He showed that it is never too late to change, to make amends, and to create a better future. The story of Arthur and Eleanor is a beacon of hope in a world that often seems driven by greed, power, and superficiality. It reminds us that even in the darkest of times, the possibility of transformation and redemption always exists. It encourages us to look beyond external appearances, to recognize the inherent worth of every individual, and to embrace the transformative power of human connection. In the end, Arthur and Eleanor's lives intertwined, not in the way he had initially intended, but in a way that brought healing, growth, and a newfound appreciation for the power of human connection. Their story serves as a reminder that true wealth lies not in material possessions, but in the bonds we forge with others, in the kindness we share, and in the positive impact we make on the world. It is a story that inspires us to be better, to do better, and to believe in the possibility of change, both in ourselves and in others.